Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. There's now a trial set. There's going to be a trial in the government's case against the far-right extremist gang known as the Oath Keepers, stemming from the group's involvement in plotting the January 6th insurrection. Today, 18 members of the Oath Keepers were in virtual court. Some of them are just charged with regular old criminal conspiracy for their involvement in the attack on the Capitol. Their trial date is set for April, just 3 months from now. Other groups, including the group's founder, Elmer Stewart Rhodes III, will face trial in July for the separate, more serious charge of seditious conspiracy. And that's an important distinction. Seditious conspiracy is a rarely used statute, basically only ever leveled at extremist groups who are trying to overthrow the government. I'll read the relevant section. According to the criminal code, quote, if two or more persons conspire to overthrow, put down, or to destroy by force the government of the United States, or by force to prevent, hinder, or delay the execution of any law of the United States. And just on the face of it, that does seem to be exactly what happened here. A heavily armed right-wing group plotted to storm the Capitol on January 6th in order to disrupt the peaceful transfer of power as outlined in the Electoral Count Act and the Constitution. And believe me, we could spend the entire hour just reading some of the details from these indictments. Take, for instance, this guy. You may have seen him before, Thomas Caldwell. He was in charge of the so-called Quick Reaction Force, that's at least according to court documents by prosecutors, whose purpose was to rapidly transport weapons into D.C. once the group had successfully taken control of the Capitol. That's the same guy who Tucker Carlson puts on his show as just a poor old disabled veteran who was only in D.C. on January 6th to stand up for his beloved country.
They claim that you plan to bring, quote, heavy weapons by boat across the Potomac River. Were you planning, what kind of heavy weapons do you think that refers to? Were you planning to do that?
I have no idea, and no, I was not, Tucker. Look, I was a Navy guy, okay? Now,
Right.
Navy guys do know about water, but it's like aircraft carriers, we're talking about blue water Navy here. So this other stuff, I don't know anything about, didn't have any role in planning any of it. It's just more hooey.
Now, maybe he's right. Maybe the whole thing is entirely fabricated and ludicrous. The seditious conspiracy indictment does paint a very different picture, I should say. The indictment lays out how Caldwell booked a hotel room in Arlington that could have quick access to D.C., and that a fellow Quick Reaction Force member, quote, said, we'll have goodies in case things go bad and we need to get heavy. Going on to note, quote, Caldwell was asking contacts if they or anyone they knew could lend a boat so that we could have our quick response team with heavy weapons standing by, quickly load them and ferry them across the river to our waiting arms. Caldwell pleaded not guilty today, as did Stewart Rhodes, the alleged brains behind this entire operation. Again, the indictment lays out how, after the election, he, quote, began encouraging members and affiliates of his organization to oppose by force the lawful transfer of presidential power. You can see there the sort of callback to the seditious conspiracy language. Also, how he and his allies, quote, began recruiting others to travel to D.C. to participate in operations aimed at stopping the transfer of presidential power. They coordinated travel across the country to enter Washington, D.C., equipped themselves with a variety of weapons, donned combat and tactical gear, and were prepared to answer Rhodes' call to take up arms at Rhodes' direction. And again, to be absolutely clear here, but those are all quotes from an indictment. Rhodes and Caldwell and their associates, they're all innocent until proven otherwise in a court of law. But we should say this. Rhodes did do a fair amount of this plotting in public. Take this November 10th, 2020 episode of conspiracy theorist Alex Jones' internet show, where in the middle of detailing a truly bananas theory about deep state pedophiles trying to sabotage Donald Trump, Rhodes just openly admitted he already had Oath Keepers stationed near D.C. to keep Trump in power.
We have men already stationed outside D.C. as a nuclear option in case they attempt to remove the president illegally. We will step in and stop it. So I've got good men on the ground already. We've been did a lead recon there last week, and we're sorting out what we're going to be staging, and we'll be there. We'll be inside D.C. We'll also be on the outside of D.C. armed, prepared to go in if the president calls us out.
Oh my God, he'd admit it. I mean, this was not some high-tech surveillance by the FBI. This wasn't some wiretap. Stuart Rhodes just went on Alex Jones's show and said, this is what we're going to do. And it sure sounds like, just in his own words, what he was going to do is seditious conspiracy right there. Armed men stationed outside D.C. as a nuclear option to use force to try to disrupt the peaceful transfer of power, the peaceful transfer of power being getting rid of Donald Trump because he lost the election. And speaking of Alex Jones, the guy who is on your screen there, the man to whom Rhodes admitted the plot amidst his peroration about the deep state pedophiles, Alex Jones had his own run-in with investigators just yesterday. In fact, Alex Jones sat down before the bipartisan House committee investigating January 6th, and to be a fly on the wall. He pleaded the fifth nearly 100 times instead of answering questions. He's not the first to plead the fifth, and he is absolutely within his constitutional rights to do just that. But then when he went on his internet show and blabbed about the whole thing to his followers.
You can't walk in to something like that with people like that. I don't know who these lawyers are running it. I don't know if they're good people or bad people. They came always polite and nice. But when you've got predators like Schiff back in the background, like a moray eel in the rocks ready to come out and eat you, then there's no reason to even dignify it because it's not legitimate. That said, the questions were overall pretty reasonable, and I wanted to answer the questions. But at the same time, it's a good thing I didn't because I'm the type that tries to answer things correctly, even if I don't know all the answers, and they can then try to claim that that's perjury.
I mean, put that on the January 6th committee movie poster. Pretty reasonable, Alex Jones. So Jones admits the investigators were polite and that their questions were reasonable, but that he nonetheless refused to answer because he did not want to get charged with perjury. Now, Jones also shared much of what the committee asked him. We'll get to that shortly, and it's interesting. But he also went out of his way to add this little tidbit about his friend Stuart Rhodes.
I saw it all as LARPing. I mean, I didn't see the Oath Keepers as bad people, but I saw a lot of it as playing soldier in the backyard. Their mission was something I really agreed with for most of its operations. But if the indictment's true that they thought that they could foment and kickstart and detonate a rebellion at the Capitol that would then lead to a larger war, that is not something I knew about or something I support or something I want.
Oh, my goodness. Your Honor, I don't know. They were dressing up. We were palling around. I got an internet show. I got nootropics to sell. I don't know what's going on. Now, a certain amount of this is likely just Jones covering his own legal exposure, but I think it's worth asking why Jones platformed the head of Oath Keepers, Stuart Rhodes, and allowed him to articulate his plan to use armed members to potentially disrupt the peaceful transfer of power if he didn't think they were actually serious about doing just that.